thank you, who have sent great wishes to me as well through text messaging when we came in here at the building. It's just great to be a father, be a man in this world. Amen. James Brown says it's a man's world. He said, be nice. But I just thank God because he know what he was doing. And so we just appreciate our Father today. It's his day is every day. And we just thank God, appreciate all the men and family leaders and just praying for all our men in the world. Our guests, if you're visiting with us, appreciate it. If you don't have a visitor's pack, raise your hand. One of the brothers will make sure that you get one. And I'm glad to see all those who came out today to share a portion of your Sunday with the Lord and the Edgewood Church of Christ. Amen. And I don't have a whole lot of slides. I actually wanted to kind of just pick out some things in this particular book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 1. And the scripture reading is 1 through 3. I definitely want to thank my family and my wife for being a part of the ministry with me and just being that great support and sometimes even leading when I am unable to, and being able to take the reins when necessary, and being able to correct me when needed. I humbly thank God for her insight and wisdom, and I just appreciate her. I appreciate all the sisters here today, but I definitely appreciate my wife and my daughter, Nakara. Pray for all of us, my sons. Just keep us in prayer as they try to become men, young men, and evolving into manhood, and just appreciate them so much. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. It reads, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit have a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun? Vanity of vanities. Vanity of vanities. He says it twice. All is vanity. One of the things a father takes seriously is imparting wisdom to his children, trying to prepare them for friendship and heartbreak, success, failures, relationships, trying to get them to be independent, trying to prepare them for the pitfalls in life and point them in the right direction. That's what we take pride in doing, in leading, and protecting our children, preparing them to leave the home and to prepare them to be able to function in society on their own and watching out for the different things. You're trying to teach them things that some things they only can experience, but you're trying to at least give them some kind of theory about some things that you've gone through, so they, well, actually facts, so that they can, in theory, intellectualize what you're trying to say. God is our Father. And that's exactly what he does for us. He's the best, first of all, at doing it. And his commandments and he has commands and he has imperatives, and they're about the same, but imperatives more have to do with encouraging you. So he has some commands, and this is what you need to do, but the mood of the command is to encourage and to excite. They're called, in the Bible, they're called exhortations. How do we, or how do you put life together to make it make sense? How do you make life work? So many people's lives are empty. That's what vanity means. It means empty. How do you put your life together so that it doesn't become empty or meaningless? How do you do that? How do you make sure you're not living a purposeless life? When it comes to living, God chose a person who would be the best person or in the best position to teach us everything about life. Solomon wrote a whole book about living life. And I can't do the whole book of Ecclesiastes. I'm just going to glean from chapter 2 and a little bit chapter 3. I'm going to close. But God chose Solomon because he chose a man that had went through life. He was the wisest man in the world that ever lived, was Solomon. Besides Jesus. Let me get that out there first. But Solomon was the wisest man ever. No one else compared to him. And the whole book of Ecclesiastes is about life. And this man lived a life and is able to tell about it. And actually wrote it, dedicated a whole book about putting your life together and making it purposeful. So we're going to talk about turning vanity into victory. Turning vanity into victory. If anyone is qualified, it's Solomon. If anybody is qualified to tell us about life, it's Solomon. He had everything that some of us and some people dream of or go after. Solomon he did it all. And he's making the point that when life gets disconnected from God, it becomes vanity. This is what he says when he talks about things under the sun. Here on earth, it will inevitably become meaningless. When life under the sun gets connected from life above the sun, it becomes meaningless. And he says, vanity of vanities, all is vain. What is the purpose of life? How can my life have meaning? This is what Solomon wanted to explore with all his wisdom. We have some good quotes from people that will say, without God, life makes no sense. You hear quotes like, life is meaningless without God. You have other quotes, life without God is like an unsharpened pencil. There is no point. You have, without God, life has no purpose. Without purpose, life has no meaning. Without meaning, life has no significance or hope. We got with these sayings, and it's okay to quote some good sayings, because Paul says, even your poets have said. Yes, sir. I read that in the Bible somewhere, Brother Whitfield, that you can quote stuff that makes sense. Yeah. Amen. One of my favorites that I dedicate a whole slide to is without God, this is talking about our week. Without God, our week would be sin day, mourn day, it's supposed to be mourn day, tears day, waste day, thirst day, fight day, and shatter day. 7 days without God makes one W-E-A-K, week. Who wants to live life without God? Solomon takes us on a tour, and I'll probably leave this slide here until we're almost finished. He takes us on a tour of his life, and you will have to write these scriptures down on your own. I'm not going to move the slide around too much anymore. Solomon takes us a tour on his life. He gives us a sampling of how he tried to fulfill a hole in his life. Solomon had a hole. He had all this wisdom that God had given him, but he had a hole in his life. And he tried to fill that hole in his life under the sun, where you're trapped in time, where you're on earth, you're trapped in space, and where humanity operates. He wanted to fulfill it without considering above the sun. And so in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, it says, Solomon says, I said in my heart, go to now, I will prove thee with mirth, with joyfulness. Therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of mirth, what doeth it? I sought in my heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting my heart with wisdom, to lay hold on folly, which is foolishness, till I might see what was the good for the sons of men, which they should do under the heaven all the days of their life. Solomon said, I partied. Solomon said, I did whatever my body wanted to do. I wanted to see the fulfillment of this. Solomon is searching. He has an emptiness there, and he's searching out. And Solomon said, guess what? I did everything that a single man can do, even though he was married. He said, I partied. In verse 4, he said, I made me great works. I builded me houses. I planted vineyards. I made me gardens and orchards, and I planted trees in them, all kinds of fruits. I made me pools of water. He says, I got me servants and maid servants, and had servants born in my house. Also, I had great possessions and small cattle. In verse 8 of chapter 2, he says, I gathered me also silver and gold, and peculiar trees, kings, provinces. I had singers, and I had women singers and male singers. I brought the instruments in. Solomon said, I didn't have to go to the party. I brought it to me. He partied hard. He said, I did everything for myself. If you know, he said, I made me gardens. I made me pools. I got me servants. I gathered me silver. I was great. What is Solomon doing? He's doing everything that his body that he desired and wanted to do. He was a player. He brought the drugs, the wine, the liquor, the women, everything he brought to him so that he can try to fulfill this whole. How did it turn out, Solomon? Ecclesiastes in 2:11, he says, then I looked on all the works, everything that I did, all the labor, and it was vanity. It was vexation of the spirit. After the party, the emptiness came back. Come on, that's right. After the pleasure, the emptiness came back. It's almost like crack. That's right. Crack is a drug that put people in the enterprise. So he's beaming up the Scotty. They put you in this enterprise and this feel-good feeling. You smoke crack, but it doesn't last long. That's right. And so you remember the feeling, so you got to feel it again. So you go get another piece, and you smoking it, it puts you back there, and then it's gone. And then you keep doing it, and now the body starts to, and this is how people get addiction to crack and to drugs. They get this high, but the high, it doesn't last long. Solomon says, look, I did all of this stuff and fulfill it, and guess what? I was having fun. It wasn't that it wasn't fun. It just didn't have any meaning. That's what he said in verse 11. Then I looked on all the works of my hands and the labor I did. It was vanity, vexation, and there was no profit under the sun. Man, it's like chasing the wind. You ever try to go out and grab some air and see if you can hold on to it? He said, this feeling that I had to fulfill, there was something missing. There was a hole. And I went out and I tried to do it without my father. I tried to do it by not listening to my parent. It was fun, but it didn't have any meaning to it. In verse 12 of Ecclesiastes chapter 2, he says, I turned myself to behold wisdom. He said, guess what? I know what I'll do. I'll get me an education. because Solomon had a gift of understanding. He had a gift of taking information and processing it and being able, and that's where his wisdom came from. It was the time when the women who had a child and the child had, a woman stole another woman's child and the child died. It was one of the children was left. And the woman claimed that was her baby. And the other woman said, well, that's my baby. And they brought the baby to Solomon, and Solomon was there to judge between who baby it was, because he didn't know whose baby it was, but he was able to process information and ask the right question at the right time, in the right moment. He can come up with it. He said, guess what? We're just going to split the child. And so the woman who wasn't child said, okay, I'm good with that. And the woman who was the mother's child said, no, let her have the child. He said, give the child to this woman. Why? Because I'd rather let the child go than to kill the child. I ain't got time. I don't have time. We holding on. I said I ain't had time. We holding on to grown children. Instead of raising them to be men, so you almost took me off. I'm getting back. I'm going to get back. He said, it was at verse 12, I need an education. He says, I turned myself, behold, wisdom and madness, in verse 12 of chapter 2, and folly. For what can the man do with that come after the king? Even that which hath been already done. Then I saw that wisdom exceeds foolishness. He said, you know what? It's better to be educated. It's an advantage. Education has an advantage, right? As far as light, as well as darkness, they're totally opposite. It gives me, education is important. It gives me advantages over the fool. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. He don't know. He makes all kind of mistakes. But a wise person, I looked and so Paul and Solomon said there is definitely an advantage of being wise. Then 15 in chapter 2, he said, then I said in my heart, as it happened to the fool, so it is also to me. So then what's the purpose of gathering education if both of us end up in the grave? So he looked at it and said, education is worthless under the sun. He keeps bringing out his vanity, but it's without God. That's right. He says, for there is no remembrance of the wise more than the fool, for seeing that which is now as the days to come shall be forgotten. And how dieth the wise man as the fool? That's what he said. He said, for this is also what? Vexation of the spirit. He said, death is an equalizer. It's beneficial. It's better than not being educated. It has its advantages, but knowledge won't keep me from the grave. That's right. Education, a doctorate degree, is not going to keep me from the grave. That's right. Remember, he's talking about without God. Death becomes the equalizer to the wise man and the fool. So he said, you know what I'm going to do in verse 18? He said, I hated all my labor, which I had taken under the sun with us without God in mind, because I should leave it to the man that shall come after me. And who knoweth whether he shall be wise or a fool? Yet he had rule over my labor where I've labored. I worked for stuff I accumulated. That took me 70 years, brother. Tell me, how old you? It took me a lifetime to build this empire, Corey. And you got to leave it. And you don't know what the person going to do with it. That's right. Some of us don't even scared to put our children on the wheel. Because you don't know what's You don't want to leave all of your labor to. Solomon says, man, this is vanity. He talks about the fruit of his labor. That's the productivity of your life. Everything you produced in your life, you can't take it. You got to leave it to somebody. Think about all the Kyra in school's got debt from going to school. Monica know, and Courtney, y'all know them college students, all this debt. You finally get out of debt and you finally make it and you got your 6 figures. Amen. And death comes. What was the purpose? You got to get what he's saying. What was the purpose? Because you don't know when death is coming. So what's the purpose of doing it without God? Because you can't determine when you're going to die. That's what he's saying. That's right. You're trapped in space. You're trapped in humanity. Prosperity under the sun without God will leave you empty. We climb the ladder of success and realize it's leaning against the wrong wall. Come on, preacher. That's right. Because we're doing it without God. What good is prosperity without God? And then that famous chapter in chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes, we see it here at funerals all the time. Everything there's a season and a time for every purpose under the heaven. You're trapped in time to be born, a time to die, time to plant, time to pluck, time to kill, time to heal, time to break down, time to weep, time to laugh. What are you doing? Time to cast away, time to keep. Opposites. Life is full of opposites. Time to do this, time to do that, time to do this. We live in a closed universe because we are under time. Soon as something good happens, here comes something bad. Soon as peace comes, here comes war. Soon as something joyful comes, here comes something sad. You're locked in the closed universe. You're trying to break out. You're trying to break out because they feel stuck as a hostage in life, because you're stuck in time and you're stuck in opposites. You can't control them. They're seasons. That means you have no control over them. It's like being in jail, living in this world without God. What are you saying? God, why are you doing this? I can't control the seasons. I can't control good and bad. And so, God, why are we trapped? And why do these things happen to us? Verse 9, he says, what profit hath he that worketh that wherein he laboreth? I have seen a travail which God has given to the sons of men. That's people to be exercised what? In it. That's one of the words he uses, to be exercised in it. He says, I've given this, the word exercise could be used, you can place that if you do your study with the word occupy. I give men to occupy themselves. He did this on purpose. Why? Because verse 11 says, he said that he has set the world in their heart, which is a bad translation. What it really should say, he has set eternity in their heart. What does that mean? That what you're trying to fulfill is really not under the sun. Come on, preacher. What you're trying to fulfill is a whole that God has created in us. He says, I set, y'all don't even know. The God says, I place eternity in everybody's heart because now they're trying to fulfill this whole, and I am the one that's going to fulfill the whole. It's not going to be education. Education is good as long as I'm connected to it. Come on, preacher. Yes, sir. You disconnect me from your education, you're going to find emptiness. That's right. You disconnect me from all your labor, you're going to find emptiness. All of your party and all. If you disconnect me from your life, well, no matter what you do, in the end, you're going to find emptiness. And you may even find it while you're living because you keep trying to fulfill it. I want to get this degree. Then you get the next degree. Then you get 2 degrees. Then you get 3. Solomon says, guess what? I was in the best position to do everything that some people are trying to do. No one, he make Donald Trump look like a welfare case. 700 wives, 300 girlfriends. That's what a concubine is. So he had everything. Gold, silver. It was nothing. Everything was at his disposal. So here's a man that have accomplished stuff that you're trying to get, and he's telling you that it ain't worth nothing without God. Because the Father has placed something inside of us called eternity that makes us yearn for him. And what we try to do is we try to fill our Father's instructions and principles and teaching with worthless idols. Come on, preacher. So what happens? Life. God says, I come to give you life. That's right. And have it more abundantly. You can have the life that you want to have. But life is a gift, not a God. That's right. Come on, preacher. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. When life becomes a God, it becomes an idol. That's right. And when life becomes an idol, God hates it. That's right. It abhors him. Why? Because he doesn't like idols, even if it's you. That's right, preacher. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's a gift from God and should never become God. The moment you make life God, instead of a gift from God, you make it an idol. And he doesn't respect idols. God says maximize your life. Maximize it doesn't make life a God. Maximize is understanding that if I want to maximize my life, I have to include God in it. That's right. God's not telling you to party. He's not telling you not to party. He's not telling you not to celebrate. He's not telling you not to get an education. He says, get it. But our Father's saying, when you get it, just keep me, don't disconnect me. That's right. Solomon tried it, and I'm giving you his whole book is about life. That's right. His whole book is about disconnecting God from my accomplishments. How you turn vanity into victory? By connecting God so that you can have a purposeful life. Because getting education and getting things in life and gathering all of those things are nothing without, it's meaningless. It doesn't have a point. What's the point? That's right. You're going to have to give your stuff to somebody. Your children that come after you, they got to die. That's right. So what's the point? What have you accomplished once you die? And you get what have you accomplished? Nothing without God. But if I do it with God in mind, whatever I'm doing, and I have God connected to it, now what I'm doing has a meaning to it because I got God in mind. Right. And now it fulfills it because there are things in life, whatever we want to gather in our prosperity of our lives, are not going to replace the relationship that we had with our Father. Fast forwarding to Ecclesiastes chapter 12. I'm getting ready to wrap up in a few minutes. And I want to make sure those young people that are here can understand as much as possible. He says, remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not. Because the evil days coming, the more you learn, the more sorrow. Okay? As a kid, you got a good life. You better enjoy it. He says, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. While the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened. He's talking about your eyes. He starts talking about body parts, and he's using this metaphorical language. What is he trying to say? He talks about the eyes. He talks about, he says, in the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble and the strong men shall bow themselves, old men start to bend over and their grinders cease. That's your teeth. That's what, that's the grinders. All that stuff gets weak. Serve God while you can. Why? Because we want to, our eyes get dim. We want to serve God. Because it's not saying that we're not to baptize people of older age, but what he's saying is that the older folks don't have the strength to do what the young people can do for the Lord. So it says, remember God while you have the strength. Yes, sir. Some people, they want to come to God when they can't see. Come on, preacher. Good preaching, good preaching. They want to come to God when they don't have any strength to go out. They want to come to God, and the lady says, no, remember me in your youth. That's right. While you got strength in your legs and your eyes are sharp and your mind is sharp and you have the energy and you're living this life, remember God in your youth. That's right. Yes, sir. He says, and the door should be shut in the streets when the sound of the grinding is low, and he shall rise up at the voice of the birds, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low. When your hearing is gone. He's using all these metaphors to say that the body is going to break down at some point. That's right. You're on your way back. What they say? You're a baby twice, adult once. Because you're going back. You get older and older and older and older. The older you get, and you start going back to the baby where somebody has to take care of you. And Solomon here, the preacher, he's just warning people, listen, this is not a judgment. These are imperatives, right? He's things to keep in mind. That we want to live our life righteous as young and then want to serve God when it's too late. When we can't do nothing, then we ain't got to do nothing but just sit in the house and pray. But you use your youth. All your youth, you forgot about God. And I'm not here to judge individuals. That's God's job. I'm just telling you what the preacher said. Just keep in mind, is he saying. Right. Just keep these things in mind. While you got strength, don't forget me. Because you don't want me to forget you when you get to that point. Amen. So don't forget me while you have strength. You got a gift, use your gift. Connect with me. You got a song to sing, sing a song. You got a ministry, then minister. You got strength, do it while you have it now. There's a lot of stuff in between these chapters. And here's what he says, closing up. In Ecclesiastes 12:13 through 14. He said, let us hear the conclusion of the matter. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Then he says, here we go. We stop there. We usually stop at that verse. Then 14 says, for God shall bring every work into judgment. What is he saying? God is going to remember. If you can't remember God in your youth, he's going to remember you when you were young. That's right. That's right. You know, you go to, I don't know if this is a bad example or not, but anyway, here you go. You know, you go to Philadelphia. I ain't been to Baltimore, so I've been to Philadelphia. It's certain, you ain't supposed to feed the animals. Because people are feeding them cotton candy, right, and popcorn and Snickers. And they'll eat it, right? Then they'll get used to that food. And then they won't eat. Because, you had a trip. I remember this back in the day. You had a trip, and I, the teacher that took, was on I was working as a counselor. And I said, well, why can't we feed them? He said, because they won't eat the food they're supposed to eat. Because they're eating junk. See, life without God is eating junk food. So when God tries to feed you, you don't want to eat. Because your life is full of what? It's full of junk food. Stuff that you've been used to. He says, listen, you better remember me in your youth. Keep God's commandments. Keep my imperatives. God commands us a lot of things. What else he commands? He commands baptism. This is a command of God.